So let's try to make it a little bit more operational, right? So how we talked about what's the problem, what's the challenge, how we fix it, but practically what we're going to do about it. So we would like to talk about disaster recovery in a simpler manner because it sounds a lot complex, right? So there are different tools that we can use, and there are 3 different verticals that we can fit in each one of them, and then we can use to expedite and accelerate our recovery if needed, and make sure that this is not going to be needed actually, right? But let's talk about protect, prepare, and recover. So protect is about putting the safeguard in the place where they belongs to protect your critical system and configuration and to make sure that they are not exposed, right? Then we have prepare. So it's not about technology and that's it. It's about technology and people. It's about testing. It's about observability. It's about monitoring. It's about understanding how your application workload behave under stress and it's continuing to serve and deliver value to your customers. So we need to test, we need to observe, we need to understand where are the gaps, fill them, and then learn and then reiterate, right? Like Ori was saying, is a journey, is a cycle. And then we have recovery. So when we are affected by something, unfortunately, we will have to recover. What are the best practices to recover? What is needed for us to recover? But let's double click and start talking about protect, right? So protect is about reducing the risk before the incident even happen, right? We need to make sure that we start with the infrastructure as a code, as a single source of truth, like Ori was saying, so that recovery is repeatable and not based on just a guesswork or memory or something like that. And then we need to also make sure that we have versioning snapshot in place. We also need full configuration coverage, including cloud and software as a service dependencies, such as DNS, like I was mentioning in the beginning, CDN, IAM, policy, and so on and so forth. But the key point is that protection reduces the risk, but it doesn't guarantee continuity. So to know if it works, we must validate it. And that's where prepare, next slide, please, will come into play, right? Prepare is where we turn the protection into something actually ready, right? Into readiness. So we need to detect, remediate the config drift, the configuration drift, for example. The code must be matched to the reality. If production has changed, but there is no source of truth, then how are we going to do that about that, right? So we need to also full visibility on what's going on the resources that we have, including third party as well, including infrastructure as a code. You cannot recover what you do not know even exist. And third, we need DR drills. What I mean by that, we need testing. We need to understand if our disaster recovery has gaps. And how do we do that? We test it, we validate, and again, back to the cycle. We understand where are the gaps, we fill those gaps, we learn, iterate, apply the changes, and then we test again. Because when recovery is happening, we want it to be boring, deterministic. We want to know exactly what's going on. We want to know how we're going to recover from a service impairment or a service disruption. And that's why prepare is there. And now if I want to double click, next slide, please, in the testing phase, why we need to run the DR drills, right? You need to answer 4 questions. So the first one is, what are we running? So we need to understand the surface that we're dealing with, all of our infrastructure mapped, all of our inventory, all of our dependencies. Then we need to go and understand what could go wrong. So how do we do this? We test. We simulate region outages, drift, we inject programmatically failure, and there are different services that we can use that to do that, but we inject the failure in a programmatic way in a test environment or in production in a different time windows, for example, to understand what can go wrong so that then we can answer the third question, what are we doing? What are we going to do about it, right? Because we know exactly how to react because we tested this, we learn what are the dependencies, what could go wrong, and we know how to act. And then we learn from this experience. We measure the RPO and RTO. We understand if the policies that we created, recovery time to objective, recovery time to objective, are requirements that are met or not. If they are not, we know exactly where, and we iterate, and we know how to fill those gaps because we tested. Next slide, please. And this procedures, this process will help us to be prepared when it comes to the time that we need to recover. So recover is where we execute under pressure. So the goal is to restore the infrastructure, but not only that, an application, the configuration, and the configuration should be restored, must be restored to a known good state, not rebuild everything manually, click hopes or from memory or guesswork, like Ori was saying, right? This means that we need to recover the full environment and its dependencies, network identity, and so on. So the recovery should be deterministic, should be boring, I always say, because we know what's going to happen, how it's going to recover, and we test it. So the recovery plan is only theory until you test. You need to test it, right? Next slide. So to recap, we went through protect, prepare, and recover. We protect our environment, we prepare, and we teach people. We also collaborate within team to know what are our standard operating procedures. When something happens, we reiterate, we observe, monitor, test, we learn from the gaps what we found during testing, and we iterate again so that then we can recover. We recover our infrastructure, data, application, but the configuration is very important. And this is one of the gaps. And this is why most disaster recovery strategy fail at scale. Organization recover the data, the application, but there's no configuration. And then we don't know what to do, right? Because the challenge that we leverage, that we have, is to understand what to do when this happens. And AWS leverage their resilience competency partners such as ControlMonkey, that they can help AWS to fill the gaps in the services so that they can help with the configuration, and we can leverage the partnership to achieve disaster recovery strategy that not fail, right?